Marcus Hale woke to the same synthetic dawn that had greeted him for 47 mornings. The dome's illumination system cycled through programmed wavelengths, mimicking Earth's sunrise with technical precision and no warmth whatsoever. He lay still for 3 minutes, a habit formed in the first week, counting his breaths until the tightness in his chest loosened enough to sit upright. The quarters assigned to human males occupied the eastern quarter of Dome 4, individual units separated by soundproofed walls that hummed faintly with the recycler's constant work. Marcus, dressed in the grey utilitarian jumpsuit provided by Calith Supply Distribution. The fabric felt wrong against his skin, too smooth, too resistant to wrinkles, designed for a species with different body chemistry. He had stopped requesting cotton alternatives after the third denial. He ate a nutrient bar at the small table bolted to the floor. It tasted like compressed earth and synthetic vanilla. The Calith nutritionists had calibrated the formula for human dietary requirements with admirable accuracy. They had not considered flavor a requirement. At precisely 700 hours, Marcus left his quarters and walked the curved corridor toward the agricultural sector. Other humans passed him, women mostly, heading to their assigned roles in medical research, structural maintenance, educational programming. They nodded. He nodded back. No one spoke. The Calith surveillance systems recorded everything. Privacy existed only in carefully measured doses. The agricultural sector sprawled across Dome 4's southern hemisphere, a vast space of hydroponic arrays, soil cultivation beds, and atmospheric regulators that kept temperature and humidity within optimal ranges. Marcus had spent his first month simply observing, learning the Calith methods, noting inefficiencies he was not yet authorized to address. The Calith agronomists worked with quiet competence, their movements economical, their communication conducted in their native language, a series of tonal variations and glottal stops that human vocal cords struggled to replicate. He had been the Ascendant Meridian's chief agricultural engineer. He had designed closed-loop food systems for multi-generational space travel. He had published research on soil microbiome preservation in zero gravity. Here he was permitted to adjust irrigation timers and monitor pH levels. Marcus checked the nutrient flow to the vertical lettuce arrays. The readings held steady within acceptable parameters. He moved to the tomato beds, noting slight chlorosis in the lower leaves, magnesium deficiency easily corrected. He made a notation in the shared database. A Calith agronomist would review it, consider it, and possibly implement the adjustment in 3 to 5 days. The morning passed in incremental tasks. At 1200 hours, he took his meal break in the communal dining area. The space was designed for mixed human-Calith interaction, though the two species naturally segregated to opposite sides of the room. Marcus sat alone at a corner table, eating reconstituted rice and protein paste that approximated chicken. Dr. Sarah Chen approached with her tray. She was one of the ship's former medical officers, now relegated to running basic health assessments under Calith supervision. She sat without asking. "You're going in today," she said. Not a question. Marcus swallowed his rice. "Scheduled for 1400. Tirvana again?" "Yes." Sarah's jaw tightened. She had been arguing for weeks that the Tarevanim sessions should be randomized, that allowing individual Calith officials to develop ongoing relationships with specific human males violated the ritual's stated clinical purpose. The council had dismissed her concerns as stemming from insufficient understanding of Calith cultural context. "You could request reassignment," Sarah said. "I could." Marcus set down his fork. "They would deny it." "You don't know that." He met her gaze. Sarah had been fighting since the moment the Ascendant Meridian entered Calith space, fighting for autonomy, for dignity, for the right to negotiate their circumstances as equals rather than accept them as refugees. Marcus respected her tenacity. He also recognized its futility. "I know exactly that," he said quietly. Sarah leaned forward, lowering her voice. "She's isolating you. Deliberately. You understand that, right? Whatever she's doing, it's not observation. It's control," Marcus finished. "I know." "Then why are you cooperating?" "Because resistance achieved nothing except more restrictions. Because the other men who fought openly now lived under enhanced monitoring and reduced privileges. Because Sarah and the other women needed someone who retained enough access to occasionally secure small concessions, better medical equipment, expanded educational resources, authorization for the children to use the recreation facilities. Because Marcus had learned long before the radiation leak destroyed his future how to survive by making himself useful to systems that would never value him as human. He didn't say any of that. He stood, collecting his tray. "I'll be fine." Sarah watched him leave. Marcus felt her frustration like heat against his back. Tirvana's archive occupied a restricted section of the central administrative complex, accessible only by biometric authorization. Marcus pressed his palm to the scanner. The door unsealed with a soft hiss, revealing the space he had come to know with uncomfortable familiarity. The lighting was amber, diffused through panels that mimicked the quality of Vardos Prime's natural sunset. The air held that faint cinnamon scent, though Marcus had never identified its source. Shelves lined the walls, filled with data crystals and physical texts. Calith preferred tangible records for certain categories of knowledge. A holographic display occupied the center of the room, currently inactive. Tirvana stood near the far window, her back to the door. She was tall, nearly 2 meters, her ochre skin marked with the subtle iridescence that signified high social status among her people. She wore the formal council robes, deep indigo fabric that moved like liquid, but her feet were bare. Marcus had noticed this detail during previous sessions. Bare feet suggested informal context in Calith custom, but Tirvana's posture remained rigidly formal. "You're punctual," she said without turning. Her English carried a slight tonal quality, artifact of her native language's structure. "I appreciate consistency." Marcus closed the door behind him, and the schedule was clear. Schedules can be clear and still ignored. Now she turned, her silver eyes meeting his with that disconcerting directness that always made him conscious of his own breathing. "Many of your companions struggle with temporal protocols. Many of my companions struggle with being treated as biological resources." The words emerged before Marcus could calculate their cost. He watched Tirvana's expression, searching for anger or offense. Instead, something that might have been amusement flickered across her features. "You're more direct today," she observed. "I wondered when your politeness would fracture." She moved toward the central area, gesturing for him to follow. The holographic display activated, showing a complex molecular structure rotating slowly in 3 dimensions. Marcus recognized human DNA, annotated with Calith script he couldn't read. "The Council believes this ritual is about preservation," Tirvana said, studying the display. "Genetic diversity, insurance against catastrophic population collapse. They are not wrong, but they are incomplete." Marcus remained standing several feet away, maintaining the physical distance protocols required. "What's the complete version?" "That humans confuse us." Tirvana reached toward the hologram, her fingers passing through the strands of simulated DNA. "Your species should not work. Your males are neither sequestered nor subordinate, yet your civilization achieved interstellar travel. Your reproduction is inefficient, dangerous to the carrier, yet you maintained it, despite possessing the technology for alternatives. You organize yourselves through systems our sociologists cannot adequately model." She looked at him directly. "And your males think. That surprises you. It contradicts 70,000 years of Calith evolutionary development." She paused. "Yes, it surprises me." The admission hung between them. Marcus felt the weight of it, the vulnerability embedded in her clinical tone. Tirvana was a counselor, third-ranked in Dome 4's governance structure. Admitting surprise was admitting limitation. "The session," Marcus said. "What do you need?" Tirvana deactivated the hologram. "Today is different. No extraction. I want to conduct a cognitive assessment. I've completed 17 cognitive assessments, administered by technicians who recorded responses without comprehension." She moved to a low table where several objects had been arranged. A fragment of earthstone, a Calith text, a small mechanical device of unknown function. "I want to understand how you think, not what you know, how you process, how you choose." She gestured to the objects. "Select one, tell me why." Marcus studied the arrangement. The stone was basalt, possibly from Earth's Pacific Northwest. The text appeared to be religious, based on the iconography. The mechanical device had the aesthetic of Calith engineering, but seemed deliberately incomplete. He reached for the stone. The surface was cool, slightly rough, familiar in a way that made his chest ache. "Why?" Tirvana asked. "Because it's broken," Marcus said quietly. "It's a fragment. It used to be part of something larger." Tirvana's eyes tracked his fingers as they traced the stone's edges. "And that appeals to you." "That's familiar to me." She moved closer, not touching, but near enough that Marcus could feel the subtle warmth of her presence, could smell that indefinable scent that might have been her skin, or might have been the air itself. "For you see yourself as broken. I see myself as separated from context. Context can be rebuilt, not if the original structure no longer exists." Tirvana reached out, her hand hovering near his, but not making contact. "The ascendant meridian still orbits this planet, damaged but repairable. Your people survive, context persists." Marcus set down the stone. "In a form I no longer recognize. Then the question becomes whether you mourn what was lost or adapt to what remains." Her fingers brushed his wrist, the same gesture from their first session. 3 seconds of contact. Marcus's pulse elevated. He did not step back. "This is not cognitive assessment," he said. "No," Tirvana agreed. "This is the beginning of understanding why cognitive assessment is insufficient." She withdrew her hand, returning to the window. Marcus remained by the table, skin still processing the memory of her touch, mind trying to categorize an interaction that fit no protocol he understood. The modifications to the hydroponic systems took 6 days to approve, and another 4 to implement. Marcus worked alongside Calith technicians who gradually shifted from skepticism to grudging cooperation. The yield increase was modest, 12% improvement in the bean arrays, 14% in the tomatoes, but measurable. Statistically significant, undeniable. Word spread through the agricultural sector. Other agronomists began requesting consultations. Marcus found himself explaining earth techniques to beings whose ancestors had been cultivating in controlled environments for longer than human civilization had existed. They listened, they asked questions, they implemented his suggestions. He began receiving work assignments beyond basic monitoring, system design, optimization protocols, strategic planning for the dome's expansion into the Western agricultural quadrant. The tasks felt closer to what he had been, what he had trained to become before the radiation leak reduced him to genetic inventory. The human women noticed the shift in his status. Some expressed approval. Increased visibility meant potential leverage. Others expressed concern. Sarah Chen appeared at his quarters on the 18th evening, after his shift had ended. "You're spending more time with them," she said without preamble. Marcus was reviewing crop rotation schedules on his personal terminal. He saved the file and gestured for Sarah to sit. She remained standing. "The agricultural staff," Marcus clarified. "Yes. The work requires collaboration. The work requires you showing them how to do what they should already know how to do." Sarah's arms crossed. "You're making yourself indispensable. I'm making myself useful. There's a difference?" Marcus shut down the terminal. "What do you want me to say, Sarah? That I should refuse the assignments? That I should maintain strict boundaries with the only people who currently allow me to practice my actual profession? I want you to acknowledge that you're being used. We're all being used. That's the arrangement." Sarah's expression hardened. "The arrangement is supposed to be temporary. We're supposed to be working toward eventual autonomy, toward building our own systems within this dome so that we can negotiate from a position of strength. That doesn't happen if we become integrated into their systems, dependent on their approval. And it definitely doesn't happen if we starve, because we refuse to accept their agricultural expertise," Marcus countered. "You think that's what this is about? Food security?" Sarah moved closer, her voice dropping. "Marcus, Tirvana has requested you for 9 consecutive sessions. 9. She's bypassing rotation protocols that exist specifically to prevent individual attachment. She's isolating you from the other men, elevating you above them in Calith perception. That's not collaboration, that's strategic selection." Marcus felt the truth of it in his chest, the same tightness that greeted him every synthetic dawn. "I know what she's doing." "Then stop cooperating." "And accomplish what exactly?" Sarah's jaw worked silently for several seconds. When she spoke again, her voice carried exhaustion rather than anger. "I don't know. But I know that whatever's happening between you and Tirvana, it's not neutral. And when it ends, because it will end, Marcus, these things always end, the cost is going to fall on all of us, not just you. She left without waiting for response. Marcus sat in the silence of his quarters, staring at the blank terminal screen, counting his breaths until his chest loosened. The summons arrived during Marcus's morning shift, not a scheduled session. Those came with 48 hours advance notification. This was immediate. Report to the archive within the hour. Marcus informed his supervisor and made his way through the dome's corridors. The biometric scanner recognized him instantly. The door unsealed. Inside, Tirvana stood at the central table where 3 holographic displays projected simultaneous data streams, agricultural outputs, atmospheric compositions, and something Marcus recognized as genomic sequencing. "Close the door," Tirvana said without greeting. Marcus complied. "What's happened?" "The Council has accelerated the timeline." She manipulated one of the displays, enlarging a section of genomic data. "They want preliminary results from the compatibility research within 6 months instead of 18. They want increased sample collection frequency. They want standardization across all human male participants." Marcus understood immediately. "They want you to stop conducting individual sessions. They want all sessions transferred to the medical facility and administered by rotation staff." Tirvana's fingers moved through the holographic data with sharp, precise gestures. "They have classified my methodology as statistically anomalous." "It is anomalous. It is effective." She turned to face him fully. "I have collected more comprehensive cognitive and physiological data from you in 9 sessions than the standard protocols have gathered from all other participants combined. I have documented response patterns that challenge fundamental K-lith assumptions about human male neurology. I have evidence that human males process complex problem-solving through methods our models cannot predict." She moved toward him, her usual careful distance collapsing. "And the Council has decided this evidence is inconvenient." Marcus held his ground. "Why?" "Because it requires them to reconsider the Tarevnim's classification structure, because it suggests human males might require different protocols than human females, because it implies that our initial assessment, that human males are intellectually negligible, was wrong." Her voice carried an edge Marcus had never heard before. "And because several counselors have decided that my interest in proving them wrong has become personal." The word hung between them, heavy with implication. "Has it?" Marcus asked quietly. "Become personal?" Tirvana's silver eyes held his. The archive's amber light cast shadows across her features, softening the angular geometry of her face. She stood close enough that Marcus could feel the warmth radiating from her skin, could count the subtle variations in her breathing. "I am a scientist," she said. "I observe. I document. I analyze." "That's not an answer." "No." Her hand rose, fingers tracing the air near his jaw, not quite touching. "It's an evasion." Marcus's heart rate elevated. His skin felt hypersensitive to the temperature differential between the cool archive air and Tirvana's proximity. He could smell that cinnamon scent, stronger now, could see the faint luminescence in her skin, responding to her emotional state. "Why am I here?" he asked. "If the Council has already decided, because I want you to understand what's at risk." Tirvana's hand finally made contact, fingertips resting against his jaw with the same deliberate firmness he remembered from before. "If they standardize the protocols, you return to being a number, a sample source, a biological resource processed with clinical efficiency." Her thumb moved slightly, tracing the edge of his cheekbone. "I want you to understand that I am arguing against that outcome. I am submitting formal objections. I am risking my position on the Council to preserve research methodology that the majority considers inappropriate." "Why?" Marcus barely recognized his own voice. "Why risk anything for this?" Tirvana's hand fell away. She stepped back, her posture reassuming its formal rigidity. "Because I am a scientist, and science requires pursuing truth regardless of political convenience." But her eyes held something beyond scientific rigor, something that made Marcus's chest tighten for entirely different reasons than the synthetic dawn ever had. "The Council votes in 3 days," Tirvana said. "Until then, We continue as scheduled. Marcus returned to his quarters that evening and lay awake, counting breaths, his jaw still remembering the exact pressure of her touch. The vote approached like weather, inevitable and transformative. Marcus threw himself into agricultural work with focused intensity, redesigning nutrient delivery systems and optimizing pollination schedules for crops that would feed people he might never speak to again. The Caliph agronomists accepted his contributions with increasing respect, occasionally asking his opinion before implementing changes. Small victories, incremental progress. Evidence of value beyond his genetic material. Tirvana's sessions continued on schedule. She asked him to describe his childhood home, to explain his decision to study agriculture instead of more prestigious fields, to articulate his relationship with Earth, with growth, with systems that sustained life. She listened with the intensity of someone trying to memorize not just his words, but the silence between them. On the evening before the council vote, she asked him to stay after the formal session had concluded. "I want to show you something," she said, moving to a section of the archive Marcus had never accessed. She touched a panel. A door slid open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. "Where does this lead?" Marcus asked. "Somewhere the surveillance systems do not reach." She glanced back at him. "Are you willing?" The question carried layers. Marcus nodded. They descended single file, Tirvana's robes brushing against the narrow walls. The stairs ended in a small chamber carved from Vardos Prime's bedrock, lit by bioluminescent panels that cast everything in soft blue-green light. The space was barely 3 meters across, circular with a low bench carved into the stone along one wall. "This is a Kelran," Tirvana explained, her voice echoing slightly in the enclosed space. "A meditation chamber. Ancient, predating the domes by several thousand years. When my people first arrived on Vardos Prime, they carved these into the rock beneath their settlements." She sat on the bench, her formal posture finally relaxing. Marcus remained standing, unsure of protocols for a space that preceded current social structures. "You can sit," Tirvana said. "There are no ranks here, no council, no hierarchy, just stone." Marcus sat, maintaining several inches of distance. The bench was cool through his jumpsuit, the air still and quiet in a way that made the dome's constant mechanical hum seem deafening in memory. "Why did you bring me here?" he asked. "Because tomorrow the council will likely vote to end our sessions. Because after that we will interact only in formal contexts with full documentation and surveillance. Because I wanted—" She paused, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on her knee. "I wanted one conversation that existed outside official records." Marcus turned to face her. The bioluminescent light made her skin appear almost ethereal. The ochre deepened to amber, the subtle iridescence glowing like embers. "What do you want to say?" Tirvana met his gaze. "That you were right. What's happening between us is not cognitive assessment. It stopped being assessment weeks ago." The admission hit Marcus with unexpected force. He had known, had felt the shift, but hearing her acknowledge it made it irreversibly real. "I don't understand what it is instead," he said carefully. "Neither do I." Tirvana's hand moved, resting palm down on the stone between them. "My species does not form individual attachments with males. It is contrary to our social structure, our evolutionary history, our entire conceptual framework for how relationships function. Males are collective responsibility, not personal connection." Her fingers spread slightly against the stone. "But I think about you when you are not present. I structure my schedule to maximize our interaction time. I experience what our psychologists would classify as possessive territoriality when other counselors suggest reassigning you. These are not scientific behaviors." Marcus felt his own hand moving before conscious thought engaged, his palm settling on the stone inches from hers, not touching, but close enough to share warmth through the rock. "What happens if the vote goes against you?" "Then I either accept the council's decision and lose access to you, or I formally challenge the decision and risk censure." Tirvana's voice carried quiet resignation. "Both outcomes separate us. There's no scenario where we continue?" "Not within legitimate structure." The implications settled between them like weight. Marcus stared at their hands, separated by inches of ancient stone, and wondered when he had started thinking in terms of we instead of I. "I need to tell you something," he said. The human women, Sarah and the others, they think you're using me, isolating me to create dependency, to maintain control. They're not wrong. Tirvana's fingers curled slightly against the stone. I am using you. Your competence provides me with evidence to challenge council assumptions. Your cooperation gives me justification to maintain our sessions. Your existence validates my research methodology. She turned her hand over, palm up, an offering. But that's not all this is. Marcus looked at her open palm, at the lines crossing her skin in patterns unlike human hands, at the warmth radiating from her flesh. He thought about Sarah's warning, about political consequences, about the cost of choices made in chambers beneath the earth where surveillance could not reach. He placed his hand in hers. Her fingers closed around his, warm and firm, her skin's texture slightly different from human, smoother, almost polished. The contact sent sensation cascading through Marcus's nervous system, heat, pressure, the subtle tremor in her grip that suggested her own pulse had elevated. I don't know what happens next, Marcus said. Neither do I. Tirvana's thumb moved against his palm, a small, deliberate movement. But I know that I wanted you to understand. Whatever the council decides, whatever consequences follow, this, she lifted their joined hands slightly, was real. They sat in the Kelrin's blue-green silence, hands clasped, breathing synchronized, until Tirvana finally stood and led them back toward the world of protocols and surveillance and votes that would determine whether they would ever return. The council voted 4-3 in favor of standardization. Effective immediately, all Tarivanim sessions would be conducted at the medical facility by rotating staff. Individual councillor-led research protocols were suspended pending formal review of methodology and ethical guidelines. Tirvana delivered the news to Marcus in the agricultural sector, her posture rigidly formal, her voice carrying no emotion. 3 other Caliph agronomists worked within earshot. Everything she said would be documented. Thank you for your cooperation with the research phase, she said. Your contributions have been valuable. Marcus maintained appropriate physical distance. Will the data be published? Eventually, pending council approval. Her silver eyes met his for exactly 2 seconds, protocol-appropriate duration. I expect analysis will take considerable time. She turned to leave, then paused. The Western Quadrant expansion. Your proposed irrigation design has been approved for implementation. You'll be leading the installation. A gift, wrapped in professional language but unmistakable. She was ensuring he retained meaningful work, status that might protect him when she could no longer do so directly. Thank you, Counselor, Marcus said. Tirvana left without further acknowledgement. Marcus stood among the hydroponic arrays, surrounded by the systems he had optimized, and felt the absence of her presence like cold water. The following weeks passed in strict routine. Marcus led the Western Quadrant installation, working 16-hour days designing and implementing the new irrigation infrastructure. The Caliph agronomists who had initially dismissed him now deferred to his expertise. He attended mandatory Tarevnim sessions in the medical facility, where efficient technicians collected samples with professional indifference. He did not see Tirvana. Sarah Chen appeared at his quarters 3 weeks after the vote. She looked exhausted, but grimly satisfied. The council approved our petition, she said. We're getting expanded medical autonomy and authorization to establish an independent education curriculum for the children. Marcus felt genuine pleasure at the news. That's significant progress. It is. Sarah sat without invitation, studying his face. Tirvana advocated for it. She spent 2 hours in council session arguing that human self-determination in certain sectors would improve overall dome stability. Marcus said nothing. I was wrong about her, Sarah continued quietly. Or partially wrong. She was using you, but not only for control. She was using the access to build understanding, to make herself vulnerable to criticism by challenging her own people's assumptions. She paused. That's harder than I gave her credit for. It cost her everything, Marcus said. It cost her a research project. It didn't cost her everything. You weren't there when she told me what she was risking. Sarah's expression softened. I know you care about her. I'm not here to tell you not to. I'm here to tell you that caring doesn't change your situation. She's a counselor. You're still categorized as a biological resource. There's no framework for anything more. I know. Do you? Sarah leaned forward. Because you're working yourself into exhaustion, Marcus. You're taking on projects that don't need 16-hour days. You're avoiding the communal areas, avoiding other humans, throwing yourself into infrastructure work like it's the only thing that matters. It's the only thing I can control. No, it's the thing you're using to avoid feeling what you can't control. She stood, moving toward the door. I understand grief, Marcus. I understand loss. But you can't irrigate your way out of this one. After she left, Marcus sat in the silence of his quarters and recognized the truth in her observation. He was treating work the way he had always treated emotional complexity, as a problem with technical solutions, as something that could be optimized through sufficient effort and expertise. It wasn't working. The Western Quadrant installation was completed ahead of schedule. Marcus's design proved even more efficient than projected. 23% yield improvement across all crop varieties, with reduced water consumption and improved nutrient retention. The Caliph Agricultural Commission submitted a formal commendation. Marcus read the commendation in his quarters and felt nothing. The work that had once provided purpose now felt mechanical. He went through motions with technical competence, but emotional absence. The other agronomists noticed, asked if he needed rest, suggested he take personal time. He declined. Stopping meant thinking, and thinking led to the Kelrin, to Tirvana's hand in his, to possibility that had been systematically dismantled by votes and protocols. 2 months after the council decision, Marcus was running diagnostic checks on the eastern sector's atmospheric regulators when a junior Caliph technician approached. "Councillor Tirvana requests your presence," the technician said, then added quickly, "Official capacity, technical consultation regarding agricultural integration with the new residential expansion." Marcus's heart rate spiked before he could control the response. "When?" "Now, if possible, Administrative Complex Conference Chamber 3. Conference Chamber 3 was not the archive. It was a formal space designed for multi-party consultations, with full surveillance and official documentation. Whatever this was, it existed within legitimate structure. Marcus cleaned the soil from his hands and made his way through the dome's corridors. The conference chamber was larger than he expected, with a curved table that could accommodate 15 people. Currently, only Tirvana occupied the space, standing before a holographic display showing the residential expansion plans. "Thank you for coming," she said without looking at him. Her tone was entirely professional. "I need your assessment of the proposed agricultural integration." Marcus approached the display. The expansion plans were comprehensive. New residential units, expanded communal facilities, and a dedicated agricultural zone designed to support an additional 200 residents. The agricultural design was competent but inefficient, using outdated layout patterns that wasted space and complicated resource distribution. "This won't work," Marcus said, studying the projection. "Explain." He began pointing out flaws: irrigation bottlenecks, inadequate light distribution, ventilation dead zones that would create microclimates incompatible with optimal growth. Tirvana listened without interruption, occasionally rotating the display to examine specific sections. "Your alternative?" she asked. Marcus spent the next 30 minutes redesigning the agricultural zone, manipulating the holographic elements to demonstrate a radial layout that maximized light exposure, simplified resource distribution, and allowed for modular expansion. He became absorbed in the problem, in the familiar satisfaction of optimization, in creating systems that would function with elegant efficiency. When he finally stepped back, Tirvana was watching him with an expression he couldn't decode. "This is superior in every measurable way," she said quietly. "Why wasn't this obvious to the original designers?" "Because they were thinking in traditional Caliph patterns. This uses hybrid principles, Caliph technology with Earth agricultural philosophy." "Integration," Tirvana said. "Yes." She saved the revised design, then deactivated the display. The room's ambient lighting brightened automatically, filling the silence between them with soft illumination. "I've missed this," Tirvana said. "Watching you think." Marcus felt the words in his chest. "I thought we were maintaining professional boundaries." "We are. This is professional." She moved toward the table, resting her hands on its surface. "But I can still miss the conversations we no longer have. What would we talk about if we could?" Tirvana's fingers traced patterns on the table. I would tell you that the Council accepted my formal challenge, that I'm currently under review for ethical violations related to research methodology, that 3 councillors want me censured, and 1 wants me removed from governance entirely. Marcus moved closer without conscious decision. What will happen? Unclear. The review process takes months. Until then, I maintain my position, but under increased scrutiny. She looked at him directly. I would also tell you that I don't regret the choices that led here, even knowing the cost. What about what you said in the Kelrin about this being real? Especially that. Marcus stood on the opposite side of the table, separated by 2 meters of polished surface and all the protocols that governed their interaction. I don't know how to do this, how to care about someone I'm not allowed to be near. Neither do I. Tirvana's voice carried quiet honesty. My species has no framework for individual attachment to males. We have collective responsibility, hierarchical obligation, reproductive protocols. We don't have... She paused, searching for the word. Longing. Is that what this is? I don't have a better term. Her hand moved across the table, palm down, fingers spread. I know that I structure my days around possible coincidental encounters. I know that I volunteered to oversee the residential expansion, specifically because it required agricultural consultation. I know that seeing you absorbed in system design makes me experience something our language has no word for. Marcus placed his own hand on the table, mirroring her position, their fingertips 20 centimeters apart. We can't do this. Not here. Not under surveillance. Not within the structure that forbids it. I know. So what do we do? Tirvana held his gaze across the table. We continue existing in the same dome. We take consultation meetings when they're professionally justified. We pretend that proximity without contact is sustainable. Is it? No. Her fingers curled slightly against the table. But it's what we have. The conference chamber's environmental systems hummed quietly. Marcus stared at the space between their hands, at the distance that might as well have been kilometers, and understood that this was the shape of their relationship now, parallel lines, technically adjacent, never touching. I should return to my duties, he said. Tirvana nodded. I'll submit your design to the expansion committee. Expect approval within a week. Marcus turned toward the door, then paused. Tirvana. Yes? Thank you. For the consultation opportunity. For trusting my expertise. Thank you for showing me that integration is possible. Her voice softened almost imperceptibly. Even when the systems resist it. Marcus left the conference chamber and returned to the agricultural sector, where he spent the rest of the day optimizing systems that would outlive him, building infrastructure for a future he might never fully inhabit. The residential expansion project consumed 3 months. Marcus worked alongside Calith engineers, human technicians and construction specialists from various dome sectors. His hybrid agricultural design became the project's centerpiece, proof that human and Calith methodologies could integrate productively. Tirvana attended progress reviews every 2 weeks. She maintained professional distance, asked technical questions, approved budget allocations and timeline adjustments. She never lingered after meetings. She never requested private consultation. Marcus learned to recognize her presence by peripheral signs, the subtle shift in air circulation when she entered a room, the particular rhythm of her footsteps on the dome's composite flooring, the way other Calith officials adjusted their posture when she approached. He learned to work through the ache in his chest that her proximity generated. 4 months after the council vote, a young human woman named Elena Torres approached Marcus in the agricultural sector. She was 26, trained in hydroponics, one of the few humans who had retained fertility despite the radiation leak. She was also engaged in what Sarah Chen carefully described as cross-cultural relationship building with a Calith research scientist. "Can I ask you something?" Eleanor said, watching Marcus adjust nutrient ratios in the vertical farming arrays. "Of course. How do you do it? Work with them every day, knowing that most of them see you as..." She paused, searching for diplomatic phrasing. "As a biological curiosity?" Marcus finished. "I was going to say as less than fully human, but yes." Marcus set down his calibration tools. "I focus on what I can control, the work, the systems, making myself useful enough that my competence outweighs their preconceptions. That sounds exhausting." "It is. Elena leaned against the cultivation bed, studying him with uncomfortable directness. Sarah told me about you and Tirvana, about what happened before the council vote. Marcus's hands stilled. Sarah had no right. She's worried about you. We all are. Elena's expression softened. Marcus, you've been working yourself into the ground for months. You barely eat, barely sleep, barely interact with other humans. That's not sustainable. I'm fine. You're not, and it's okay to not be fine. She paused. For what it's worth, I don't think what you and Tirvana had was wrong. Complicated, yes. Probably impossible within current structures, but not wrong. Marcus looked at her directly. What do you want from me, Elena? I want you to consider that maybe working yourself to exhaustion isn't honoring what you lost. It's just avoiding it. She pushed away from the cultivation bed. Dr. Amari is organizing a gathering tonight. Human only. No Caliph, no surveillance, just people who understand what it's like to exist in someone else's category system. You should come. I know you don't do social things. Come anyway. She left before Marcus could formulate another objection. That evening, he found himself walking toward the communal recreation area during off-hours, when human use was authorized. 23 people had gathered, a mix of former ship crew, technicians, medical staff, educators. Sarah Chen was there, as was Dr. James Amari, the ship's former chief psychologist. They were not discussing politics or survival strategies. They were sharing stories, memories of Earth, jokes that only humans would understand. Moments of absurdity and grace from their shared history. Marcus sat at the periphery listening. Someone mentioned coffee, real Earth coffee, not the synthetic substitute the Caliph nutritionists provided. The group descended into detailed remembrances of favorite cafes, perfect brewing methods, the exact temperature at which espresso became transcendent. What about you, Marcus? Dr. Amari asked. Did you have a coffee place? Marcus hadn't thought about Seattle in months. There was a roaster near the university, small place run by a Korean woman who sourced beans from single farms. She knew her customers by drink. I never had to order. What was yours? Elena asked. Pour over. Ethiopian yirgachefe. She'd time the bloom to the second. The memory hit harder than expected. The ritual of it, the particular smell of fresh ground beans, the woman's quiet competence, the sense of being known without explanation. I miss being known like that, Sarah said quietly. Being a person instead of a category. The group fell silent. Marcus felt the collective weight of their displacement, their reduction to biological resources and cultural curiosities and problems requiring systematic management. Tirvana knows Marcus, Elena said, breaking the silence. Really knows him. I've watched them in project meetings. She tracks his thinking, anticipates his objections, builds on his insights like they're conducting jazz improvisation. That's different, Sarah said. That's intellectual recognition. It's not different, Elena interrupted. It's exactly the same. It's seeing someone as a full person instead of a function. It's what we all want and what their entire system is designed to prevent. Marcus felt multiple gazes on him. It doesn't matter what Tirvana sees. The council forbids personal attachment. The structure is clear. Structures change, Dr. Amari said, slowly, incrementally, through accumulated small violations of what was previously absolute. That's how all cultural evolution works. Are you suggesting I violate council directives? Marcus asked. I'm suggesting that you're already in violation. You're just complying with the punishment. Dr. Amari leaned forward. Marcus, you're allowed to want what you want. You're allowed to grieve what you lost. You're allowed to be more than agriculturally useful. The words settled in Marcus's chest with uncomfortable weight. He stayed for another hour, listening to stories, contributing occasional comments, allowing himself to exist among people who remembered him as fully human. When the gathering dispersed, Sarah walked with him partway to his quarters. Thank you for coming, she said. I know that was difficult. It was necessary, Marcus acknowledged. I've been avoiding necessity. What will you do now? I don't know. He paused outside his quarters. But I think I need to stop pretending that working 16-hour days is the same as living. Sarah smiled, tired but genuine. That would be a good start. The residential expansion entered its final phase. Marcus's agricultural design had proven so successful that the council authorized its implementation in 2 other domes. He received formal recognition from the Agricultural Commission, a salary increase, and authorization to supervise 3 Calith agronomists. None of it touched the emptiness Tirvana's absence had created. He began attending the human gatherings regularly. Not every time, but enough to remember what conversation felt like, what laughter sounded like, what it meant to be seen as Marcus instead of human male, viable, classification, agricultural specialist. He also began visiting the Kelrin. The meditation chamber remained accessible through Tirvana's archive, though he had no authorization for either space. The first time Marcus descended those narrow stairs alone, his heart hammered with the certainty of imminent discovery. But the surveillance systems truly didn't reach that deep. The Kelrin existed outside official structure. He sat on the stone bench in blue-green bioluminescent light and remembered Tirvana's hand in his, the warmth of her skin, the tremor in her grip, the impossibility of everything they couldn't have. Marcus began going there once a week, always during off hours, always briefly. It became ritual, descending into stone, sitting in silence, allowing himself to feel what he had been systematically avoiding: loss, longing, the particular ache of wanting someone the structure forbade. On a Tuesday evening, 5 months after the council vote, Marcus descended to the Kelrin and found Tirvana already there. She sat on the bench, still wearing her council robes, her posture neither formal nor relaxed, but something suspended between. She looked up when he entered. "I hoped you might come," she said quietly. Marcus remained standing. "How did you know I've been using this space?" "The environmental systems log access to the archive. I review the logs." Her eyes held his. "You come every Tuesday. I shouldn't be here at all." "Neither should I." Tirvana gestured to the bench. "But here we are." Marcus sat, maintaining the same careful distance they had preserved across conference tables and project sites. The review. What happened? Inconclusive findings, censure for methodology violations, but no removal from council. "I'm permitted to continue my position with enhanced oversight." She paused. "I'm also permanently barred from conducting individual research with human subjects." "I'm sorry. Don't be. I made a choice. I accept its consequences." Her hand rested on the stone between them, palm up. "I would make the same choice again." Marcus stared at her open palm, at the offering she had no right to make in a space where no one could witness or sanction it. "Why are you here?" "Because I've spent 5 months pretending that professional proximity is sufficient. Because I've attended 23 project meetings and maintained perfect professional boundaries while feeling like I was suffocating." Tirvana's voice carried quiet intensity. "Because Tuesday evening is the only predictable time when you're not working yourself to exhaustion, and I thought perhaps the universe might grant me one coincidental encounter." "This isn't coincidental. No, it's deliberate. It's a violation of the separation protocols the council implemented." Her fingers curled slightly against the stone. "It's also the only honest thing I've done in 5 months." Marcus felt his own hand moving, settling on the stone near hers, not touching but close enough to share warmth through rock. "What do we do with honesty when the structure forbids it?" "I don't know, but I'm tired of pretending I don't feel what I feel." Tirvana turned her hand, palm down, her fingers extending until they rested against his. "I'm tired of measuring worth in professional contributions. I'm tired of being a counselor instead of being someone who—" She stopped. Marcus watched her struggle for words their respective languages didn't provide. "Someone who loves you," he finished quietly. Tirvana's breath caught. "Is that what this is?" "I don't have a better term either." Marcus shifted, closing the distance between them until their shoulders touched, until he could feel the warmth of her through multiple layers of fabric. "I know that I think about you constantly. I know that I design agricultural systems, partly to impress you even when you'll never see them. I know that Tuesday evenings in this stone room have become more real than anything else in my life." He turned to face her. The bioluminescent light cast her features in soft relief, highlighting the architecture of her face, the silver of her eyes, the slight parting of her lips as she breathed. "I know that I love you," Marcus said, "despite the impossibility, despite the consequences, despite everything the council and the structure and the cultural framework say should prevent it." Tirvana's hand rose, her palm cupping his face with heartbreaking gentleness. We can't build anything from this. The system won't permit it. Then we exist in the moments it can't reach. Marcus covered her hand with his own. Like this one. She leaned forward, her forehead resting against his, their breath mingling in the small space between them. This won't be enough. Probably not. Marcus's free hand found her waist, feeling the warmth of her skin through the robes. But it's what we have. They sat together in the Kelrin's timeless silence, holding each other with the desperate gentleness of people who understood exactly what they were risking, exactly what they couldn't keep, exactly how precious the present moment had become. The Tuesday evening meetings became routine. Marcus would descend to the Kelrin during off hours. Tirvana would already be there, or would arrive minutes later. They would sit together in bioluminescent light and allow themselves what the world above denied. They talked about everything. Tirvana described her childhood on Vardos Prime's southern continent before she joined the council, when she thought she would become a simple researcher studying atmospheric chemistry. Marcus told her about growing up in Seattle, about his father who had died when Marcus was 16, about choosing agriculture because he wanted to work with life instead of abstractions. They talked about the impossibility of their situation, the council's prohibitions, the cultural frameworks that had no category for what they were becoming to each other. They touched, carefully, deliberately, with full awareness that every contact was both gift and violation. Marcus learned the texture of her skin, smoother than human and slightly warmer, with that subtle iridescence that responded to her emotional state. He learned that she was sensitive along the curve where her neck met her shoulder, that her breathing changed when he traced the line of her jaw, that she made a soft sound almost like a hum when she was content. Tirvana learned his tension patterns, could read his emotional state in the set of his shoulders, knew when he was working too hard by the way he held his neck. She would press her thumbs into the knots of his upper back, working them loose with patient precision, while he gradually surrendered to the relief of being cared for. They never crossed certain boundaries. Some combination of respect, fear, and awareness that certain intimacies would make the separation unbearable kept them from going further than embrace, kiss, the careful exploration of bodies through clothing. It was enough. It was nowhere near enough. 6 weeks into their clandestine meetings, Tirvana arrived at the Kelrin with visible tension in her posture. "The Council is proposing new regulations," she said without preamble. "Formal restrictions on cross-species personal interaction. They're calling it Cultural Preservation Protocol." Marcus felt cold settle in his chest. Defining what exactly? Inappropriate proximity, unsanctioned physical contact, emotional attachment that exceeds professional boundaries. She sat heavily on the bench. "It's designed to prevent exactly what we're doing. How did they know to create it? They didn't. It's precautionary. Several councillors believe that increased human integration into dome operations creates risk of inappropriate relationship formation. They want preventative measures." Marcus sat beside her, their shoulders touching. "When does it take effect?" 4 weeks, pending final vote. Tirvana's hand found his, fingers interlacing with familiar ease. "If it passes, these meetings become actionable violations. Surveillance protocols will be enhanced. Penalties will be severe. For both of us? For me more than you. As a councillor, I'm held to stricter standards. Violation would mean immediate removal from governance and possible exile from Dome 4 entirely." Marcus turned to face her fully. "Then we stop before the vote, before the risk becomes real." "I don't want to stop, neither do I. But I won't let you sacrifice your entire life for Tuesday evenings in a meditation chamber." Tirvana's eyes held his with intensity that made breathing difficult. "What if I want to sacrifice it? Then I refuse to let you." Marcus cupped her face with both hands. "You have a life here. Purpose. Work that matters. A position that allows you to influence policy, to protect people, including my people. I won't take that from you for something that can't exist in daylight. So we just end this? Pretend we don't feel what we feel? No. We acknowledge what we feel. We acknowledge what we built here." He rested his forehead against hers. "And then we make the choice that allows us both to survive." Tirvana's hands gripped his arms, her fingers pressing hard enough to leave impressions. "I don't know how to go back to professional distance after this." "Neither do I." Marcus's voice cracked slightly. "But we do it anyway. They held each other in the Kelrin's blue-green light, memorizing the shape of each other's presence, the rhythm of synchronized breathing, the particular way they fit together despite evolutionary divergence. When they finally separated, Tirvana touched his face one last time. "Thank you for showing me that love is possible even when the structure forbids it. Thank you for teaching me that vulnerability isn't weakness." They left the Kelrin separately, Tirvana ascending first, Marcus waiting 10 minutes before following. When he emerged into the archive's amber light, the space felt emptier than it had ever been. He did not return to the Kelrin the following Tuesday, or the Tuesday after. The new regulations passed with 5 votes in favor, 2 abstaining. Marcus threw himself back into agricultural work, designing systems that would outlive him, building infrastructure for futures he would observe from careful distance, and tried to forget what Tirvana's skin felt like under his hands. 8 months passed in professional efficiency. Marcus's agricultural innovations became standard across all 4 domes. He supervised installation teams, trained new agronomists, consulted on expansion projects. He attended the human gatherings irregularly, maintained cordial relationships with Kalith colleagues, existed in the space between fully integrated and permanently foreign. He saw Tirvana at project reviews and council consultations. They maintained perfect professional boundaries. They did not speak unless work required it. They perfected the art of occupying the same space while remaining fundamentally absent from each other. It felt like dying slowly. Sarah Chen noticed, of course. She appeared at his quarters on a Thursday evening, carrying a bottle of something amber that she claimed was close enough to whiskey that nostalgia does the rest. "You're doing it again," she said, pouring 2 glasses. "Doing what?" "Optimizing yourself into emotional numbness." She handed him a glass. "You worked 16 hours today, on a routine maintenance cycle that needed maybe 6. Marcus sipped the not-quite whiskey. It burned appropriately. "The work needed doing." "The work always needs doing, that's not why you're doing it." Sarah sat across from him. "How long since you've slept more than 4 hours?" "I sleep fine." "You sleep like someone trying to exhaust themselves unconscious." "There's a difference." Marcus set down his glass. "What do you want from me, Sarah?" "I want you to stop pretending that noble suffering is the same as healing." Her voice softened. "I know you loved her. I know ending it was the right choice. I also know that you're allowed to grieve what you lost." "I grieve by working." "You hide by working. It's different." Marcus stood, moving to the window that overlooked the agricultural sector. The hydroponic arrays glowed with growth lights, orderly rows of green against the dome's curved walls. Systems he had designed, infrastructure that would feed thousands. "I built something here," he said quietly. "When I arrived, I was categorized as a resource. Now I'm a specialist. I have authority, respect, purpose. The work matters." "I'm not saying it doesn't matter. I'm saying it's not enough." Sarah joined him at the window. "You're allowed to want more than professional recognition, Marcus. You're allowed to want connection, intimacy, love. You're allowed to want Tirvana. Wanting doesn't change reality." "No, but maybe reality needs changing." Marcus turned to face her. "The regulations are clear. Cross-species personal relationships are prohibited. Violation means exile for her, enhanced monitoring for me. How exactly do you propose changing that?" "By recognizing that unjust systems shouldn't be obeyed just because they're systems." Sarah's expression carried intensity Marcus rarely saw. The Council created those regulations out of fear. Fear that humans might actually integrate, might actually form bonds that challenge their hierarchical assumptions. But fear-based policy is always vulnerable to evidence. What evidence? That integration works. That human-Kalith cooperation produces better outcomes than separation. That individual relationships can strengthen cross-cultural understanding rather than threaten it. She paused. Elena and Dr. Vormesh submitted a formal petition 3 days ago. They want recognition of their relationship as legitimate cultural exchange. Marcus felt shock cascade through him. The Council will never approve that. Maybe not, but Elena and Vormesh are willing to risk censure to establish the precedent. Sarah's hand rested on his shoulder. They're not the only ones. 4 other couples are preparing similar petitions. This is becoming a movement, Marcus. Whether the Council acknowledges it or not, humans and Kalith are forming connections. Tirvana can't risk that. Her position exists to serve the people, not the structure. Sarah squeezed his shoulder gently. Talk to her. Let her decide what she's willing to risk. After Sarah left, Marcus stood at the window for another hour, watching systems grow according to design, trying to calculate the odds of changing frameworks that had existed for millennia. Marcus requested a formal consultation meeting with Tirvana. Through official channels with documented justification, agricultural integration analysis for the proposed Dome 5 expansion, she accepted the meeting request within an hour. Conference Chamber 3. Same space where they had redesigned infrastructure together months ago. Same table, same ambient lighting, same surveillance systems, documenting every interaction. Tirvana arrived exactly on time, her council robes perfectly arranged, her posture carrying all the formal authority her position demanded. She greeted him with professional courtesy and activated the holographic display showing Dome 5 plans. Your assessment of the agricultural integration proposal, she asked. Marcus studied the plans without seeing them. I didn't request this meeting to discuss Dome 5. Tirvana's hand stilled on the display controls. Then why? Because I need to know if you're aware of the relationship petitions being submitted. I'm aware. The council is reviewing them. And the outcome is uncertain. Several councillors view them as dangerous precedent. Others see them as inevitable cultural evolution. She deactivated the display. Why are you asking me this? Marcus moved around the table, closing the distance between them, but stopping just outside touching range. Because I want to know if we're going to spend the rest of our lives maintaining professional distance while other people fight for the possibility we surrendered. Tirvana's breathing changed, subtle but audible. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that maybe we gave up too easily, that maybe the regulations are unjust and we shouldn't comply just because they exist. He paused. That maybe I love you enough to risk whatever consequences come from saying so in a surveilled conference room. Tirvana's eyes widened slightly. Marcus, I know the risks. I know what you could lose, but I also know that I've spent 8 months pretending I don't feel what I feel, and it's destroying me. His voice carried quiet intensity. If there's any chance, any possibility at all that those petitions might change the framework, I want to be part of that fight. The council could exile you. They could. But they could also realize that humans and Caliph are capable of forming legitimate bonds. That love isn't a threat to cultural stability. Marcus took the final step, bringing them within touching distance. I want to be with you, Tirvana. Openly. With whatever consequences that brings. Tirvana reached out, her hand resting against his chest, palm flat over his heart. She could undoubtedly feel his elevated pulse, could read his emotional state through physiological response. I've missed you, she said quietly. Every day for 8 months. Then let's stop missing each other. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. Either we comply with unjust regulations or we challenge them. Marcus covered her hand with his own. Either we accept being categorized and separated, or we insist on being recognized as people capable of choosing each other. Tirvana's other hand rose to his face, her thumb tracing his cheekbone with heartbreaking gentleness. If we do this, if we formally petition for relationship recognition, I will face immediate censure, possible removal from council. Definite enhanced surveillance. I know. You will become subject to investigation. Your professional status could be revoked. The human community might face political backlash. I know that too. Marcus leaned into her touch. I also know that I'd rather face those consequences with you than spend another 8 months pretending this doesn't matter. Tirvana's forehead rested against his. You understand that we might lose everything, that the council might refuse all petitions and implement even stricter separation protocols. Yes, but we might also change the system. Marcus's arms circled her waist, pulling her close. And either way, I'm done hiding. They stood together in Conference Chamber 3, under full surveillance, holding each other with deliberate visibility. When they finally separated, Tirvana's expression carried something Marcus had never seen before. Hope. I'll prepare the petition, she said. It will require extensive documentation, testimony from both of us, evidence of emotional and intellectual compatibility, whatever it takes. Tirvana smiled, small and tentative and utterly transformative. Whatever it takes. The petition process was exhaustive. Marcus and Tirvana submitted to psychological evaluations, compatibility assessments, cultural integration analyses. They provided written testimony explaining the nature of their relationship, how it formed, why they believed it enhanced rather than threatened cross-species understanding. The human community reacted with mixed responses. Some, like Sarah and Elena, offered immediate support. Others expressed concern about political ramifications, about risking the fragile progress they had achieved. Dr. Amari organized a community meeting to discuss the implications. "What Marcus and Tirvana are doing affects all of us," he said, addressing the gathered humans. "If the council approves their petition, it establishes precedent for human-Kalith relationships. If they deny it, we need to be prepared for potential backlash." "Or we could ask them not to risk it," someone said. "We've worked too hard for stability to jeopardize it for one relationship." Marcus stood. "I understand your concern. I also need you to understand that stability built on denying our humanity isn't stability. It's compliance." "What's wrong with compliance if it keeps us safe?" another voice asked. "Because safety through self-erasure isn't safety. It's slow disappearance." Marcus looked around the room. "The Kalith will never see us as fully human if we accept being categorized as resources. If we agree that our emotions, our relationships, our capacity for love, that none of that matters as much as maintaining their comfort." Sarah stood beside him. "Marcus is right. The relationship petitions are about more than individual couples. They're about establishing that we're people with the same emotional complexity as Kalith, that we deserve recognition beyond our biological functions." The vote, when it came, was overwhelmingly in favor of supporting the petitions. The council hearings began 3 weeks later. 5 couples presented their cases over 5 days. Eleanor and Dr. Vormesh went first, describing their relationship with careful eloquence, explaining how their connection had deepened their respective cultural understanding. Marcus and Tirvana testified on the 4th day. The council chamber was a vast circular space with tiered seating, designed to accommodate hundreds of observers. Currently it held the 9 sitting councillors, various administrative officials, and a gallery of both human and Kalith citizens who had requested permission to witness the proceedings. Marcus sat beside Tirvana at the respondents' table, acutely aware of every eye on them, every recorder documenting their words. The lead councillor, an elderly Kalith named Sortavesh, addressed them with careful formality. "Councillor Tirvana, Engineer Hale, you have submitted a petition requesting formal recognition of an intimate personal relationship between a Kalith councillor and a human male. This petition, if approved, would represent unprecedented deviation from cultural protocols established over millennia. Please explain why the council should consider this request." Tirvana stood. Marcus watched her transform into the composed, intellectually formidable presence he had first encountered in the archive. "Honored councillors," she began, "I submit this petition not to challenge Kalith cultural tradition, but to expand its application to circumstances our ancestors never anticipated. When our protocols were established, they addressed relationships within a single species. They could not account for encountering another intelligent species capable of genuine partnership." She gestured to Marcus. "Engineer Hale and I have developed what I can only describe as profound emotional and intellectual compatibility. Our connection has enhanced my understanding of human cognition, improved cross-species cooperation in multiple dome sectors, and demonstrated that individual bonds can strengthen rather than threaten cultural stability." Sortavesh listened without expression. "And you believe this connection justifies violating prohibitions on personal attachment to males?" "I believe those prohibitions exist to prevent exploitation and maintain social order within Kalith framework. Neither concern applies to a consensual relationship between cognitive equals from different species." Tirvana's voice carried quiet intensity. "I believe that refusing to acknowledge such relationships when they form organically and beneficially serves fear rather than wisdom." Another councillor spoke. "What of the power differential? You are a councillor, he is classified as a protected biological resource. How can such a relationship be truly consensual?" Marcus stood before Tirvana could respond. Because I am not a resource. I am a person with the capacity to make informed choices about my own emotional commitments. Counselor Tirvana has never exploited her position. She has in fact risked that position repeatedly to ensure my agency was respected. He looked at Tirvana. She taught me that vulnerability isn't weakness. That allowing myself to be known, truly known, was an act of courage, not surrender. I choose this relationship freely, with full awareness of the consequences. The questioning continued for 3 hours. Marcus and Tirvana answered with patient honesty, describing their connection, their careful navigation of inappropriate power dynamics, their belief that love between cognitive equals should be recognized regardless of species origin. When the session finally concluded, Marcus felt exhausted but strangely lighter. Whatever the council decided, they had spoken truth into official record. They had refused to pretend their love didn't exist. The council deliberated for 2 weeks. During that time, Marcus and Tirvana maintained professional distance in public contexts, but met each evening in the Kelrin, holding each other in bioluminescent silence, waiting for judgment. Chapter 14. Harvest. The council rendered its decision on a Tuesday evening. All 5 relationship petitions were approved, with conditions. Couples would be subject to annual review. Public display of affection would remain limited by cultural sensitivity protocols. Any Caliph officials in such relationships would face enhanced ethical oversight. But the relationships would be recognized, legitimate, protected, under the same frameworks that governed Caliph partnerships. Marcus stood in Conference Chamber 3, reading the official decision on a holographic display, trying to process that the impossible had become policy. Tirvana entered the chamber, her council robes absent, wearing instead simple civilian clothing Marcus had never seen her in. She looked younger, less armored, more present. "They approved it," Marcus said, voice rough with emotion he hadn't allowed himself to feel. "All 5. Tirvana moved to his side. Sortavesh abstained, but the other 8 voted in favor. Narrow majority, but majority nonetheless. "What does this mean for you? For your council position?" "Enhanced oversight, as expected. Quarterly ethical reviews. Prohibition from voting on human Caliph policy issues, where my personal interest might influence judgment." She took his hand, fingers interlacing with familiar ease. "And freedom to acknowledge that I love you without violating regulation." Marcus pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her with the desperate relief of someone who had prepared for loss and received life instead. "I can't believe we won. We didn't win, we established precedent. We changed what was previously absolute." Tirvana's hand cupped his face. "But yes, we get to be together." They stood holding each other in the conference chamber's bright light, no longer hiding, no longer pretending that professional distance was sustainable. "What now?" Marcus asked. "Now we build what we couldn't before, openly, with whatever challenges that brings." Tirvana leaned back. Studying his face with the intensity he had learned meant she was memorizing details. "Now we prove that integration isn't just possible, it's transformative." Marcus kissed her then, slow and deliberate, tasting the future they had fought to claim. When they finally separated, both breathing slightly elevated, Tirvana smiled with unguarded joy. "Take me to the Kelrin," she said. "I want to be in the place where we first chose each other, where we first acknowledged what we felt." They descended the narrow stairs hand in hand, emerging into blue-green bioluminescent light. The stone chamber felt different now, not hidden, but sanctuary, not violation, but home. Marcus sat on the bench and pulled Tirvana beside him, eliminating the careful distance they had maintained for so many months. She settled against him, her head resting on his shoulder, her warmth seeping through layers of clothing. "I used to come here alone," Marcus said quietly. "After we ended things, sitting in the dark trying to convince myself that work was enough." "Was it?" "No, but I didn't know how to want anything else." His hand traced patterns on her shoulder. "You taught me that wanting was possible, that I could be more than functionally useful." Tirvana's fingers found his, interlacing. "You taught me that my species' assumptions about human males were not just wrong, but harmfully incomplete. That dismissing an entire category of consciousness was intellectual cowardice masquerading as tradition." They sat in companionable silence, listening to each other's breathing, feeling the steady rhythm of being known and knowing in return. "What will you do with the Western Quadrant expansion?" Tiravana asked eventually. "Finish the design. Train the installation team. Maybe take some time off afterward." Marcus paused. "I've been working 16-hour days for almost a year. I think I'm allowed rest." "You're allowed much more than rest." Tiravana shifted to face him fully. "You're allowed joy, connection, the freedom to build a life that includes more than agricultural systems. Build it with you? If you'll have me." Marcus kissed her again, tasting the salt of tears he hadn't realized he was crying. "Yes, for however long we have, in whatever form it takes." They stayed in the Kelrin until the dome's environmental systems cycled to night mode. When they finally emerged, ascending into a world that would now permit their presence together, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in the 14 months since the ascendant meridian had entered Kalith space. Hope, not for restoration of what had been lost, not for return to some imagined normalcy, but hope for something new, a life built from integration rather than separation, from choice rather than category, from love that had survived every system designed to prevent it. They walked through Dome 4's corridors hand in hand. Other Kalith noticed, observed, made no comment. The new regulations were clear. Personal relationships between species were now legitimate. Marcus and Tiravana reached the residential sector, where human and Kalith quarters existed in adjacent corridors. They stood at the junction point, neither ready to separate yet. "Stay with me tonight," Marcus said. "Not in the Kelrin, not hidden. Stay in my quarters. Let the world know we're building something together." Tiravana's smile carried the weight of everything they had survived to reach this moment. Yes. They entered Marcus's quarters together. The space was small, functional, designed for solitary existence. But as Tiravana settled beside him, as they talked through the night about futures they could finally plan together, it transformed into something neither system nor structure could categorize. It became home.